Cassandra Blackwood thought the abandoned Greyhound bus depot she purchased for $1 at a Phoenix City tax auction was just a desperate gamble to save her family from homelessness after losing her position as a biomedical engineer left them 38 days from eviction with no prospects for employment that could cover their mounting debts and basic survival needs. But when her 11-year-old daughter Lyra's determination to help renovate their new business led her to investigate the depot's basement storage areas that city records claimed didn't exist, they discovered a hidden underground facility containing classified documents and equipment from Operation Mindbridge, a secret CIA program that had conducted illegal human experimentation on American citizens during the Cold War, with detailed records proving that government officials, medical institutions, and pharmaceutical companies had spent 60 years systematically covering up systematic torture and mind control experiments that affected over 15,000 unwilling subjects whose families were told their loved ones had died in accidents or committed suicide to prevent exposure of federal crimes that modern intelligence agencies and corporate medical establishments have killed to keep buried. If this story moves you, hit subscribe, give it a like, and share where you're watching from. The final unemployment benefit notification had arrived on a Tuesday morning with the bureaucratic precision that transforms stable families into cautionary tales, marking the conclusion of 13 months of systematic financial deterioration that had transformed Cassandra Blackwood from a respected biomedical engineer earning $89,000 annually at Phoenix Biotech Solutions to a desperate single mother whose daily existence required mathematical calculations about every expenditure, while her 11-year-old daughter Lyra watched their previously secure middle-class life dissolve into survival strategies that required adult-level understanding of resource allocation and crisis management that no elementary school student should need to comprehend during formative developmental years. At 37 years old and 14 months removed from her termination during corporate restructuring that had eliminated entire research divisions throughout Arizona's biotechnology sector, Cassandra confronted the mathematical reality that her family would be displaced from their apartment within 5 weeks unless she could generate income sufficient to cover accumulated rent arrears, current monthly expenses, and the administrative penalties that property management companies impose on tenants whose payment histories had been compromised by unemployment, despite previous reliability and professional stability that had characterized their residential record. The 2-bedroom apartment in Phoenix's Ahwatukee district had served as their family's sanctuary for 6 years, a modern unit in a gated community where Cassandra had maintained exemplary tenant status while advancing through biomedical research positions that had provided steady income growth and professional recognition within Arizona's expanding life sciences industry, before corporate mergers and research funding reductions had systematically eliminated positions requiring her specialized expertise in protein synthesis and pharmaceutical development. Her professional background reflected 17 years of dedicated advancement through increasingly sophisticated biomedical engineering roles that had begun during her graduate studies at Arizona State University's Biodesign Institute, where her doctoral research on targeted drug delivery systems had attracted attention from leading pharmaceutical companies, whose competitive recruitment efforts had provided multiple employment opportunities and career advancement pathways that had characterized the biotechnology industry's expansion during the early 2000s, when federal research funding and venture capital investment had supported unprecedented innovation and professional development within life sciences fields. Her early career had been spent at Genomics Incorporated, a Phoenix-based startup that specialized in personalized medicine applications and genetic testing protocols that required mastery of advanced laboratory techniques, regulatory compliance procedures, and clinical trial management, that had provided comprehensive professional development and technical expertise that would serve as foundation for subsequent career advancement through progressively responsible positions within Arizona's growing biotechnology cluster. The transition to Phoenix Biotech Solutions occurred in 2018, when the company recruited Cassandra to lead their protein folding research division, a position that required directing multi-million-dollar research projects and managing teams of laboratory scientists and clinical researchers whose work contributed to breakthrough treatments for autoimmune disorders and cancer therapy protocols that had generated 17 patents and 43 peer-reviewed publications that documented her technical competence and leadership capabilities within the highly competitive pharmaceutical development industry. Her specialized expertise encompassed advanced biochemistry, molecular biology, biostatistics, and pharmaceutical manufacturing processes that had been developed through continuous professional education and research participation that included collaborations with major universities, government research institutions, and international pharmaceutical companies, whose cutting-edge projects required mastery of sophisticated analytical techniques and regulatory frameworks that characterize legitimate biomedical research, serving public health objectives while maintaining commercial viability and intellectual property protection.
The research projects under Cassandra's direction had focused specifically on developing novel drug delivery mechanisms that could overcome biological barriers and improve therapeutic effectiveness for treatments targeting neurological disorders, autoimmune diseases, and various cancer types that required precise molecular targeting and controlled release mechanisms that represented significant advancement over existing therapeutic approaches and delivery systems that had limited effectiveness due to biological compatibility and absorption challenges. Her team's most significant achievement had been the development of biocompatible nanoparticle systems that could cross the blood-brain barrier while carrying therapeutic compounds directly to targeted neural tissues, a breakthrough that had potential applications for treating Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and various forms of brain cancer that had previously been difficult to address through conventional pharmaceutical approaches due to the brain's natural protective mechanisms that prevented most medications from reaching affected neural tissues. The nanoparticle delivery system had undergone 3 years of laboratory testing and animal trials that demonstrated unprecedented effectiveness and safety profiles, generating substantial interest from major pharmaceutical companies and government research agencies whose licensing negotiations and partnership discussions had been in progress when corporate restructuring and funding redirections had eliminated Cassandra's position and terminated the research program, despite its promising results and commercial potential. But industry consolidation during 2022 and 2023 had systematically eliminated research positions throughout Arizona's biotechnology sector as venture capital funding decreased and pharmaceutical companies reduced long-term research investments in favor of shorter development cycles and lower-risk projects that could generate more predictable returns on investment without requiring the extended timelines and substantial resource commitments that characterized innovative research programs like Cassandra's neurological drug delivery research that could have generated substantial revenue and therapeutic benefits if development had continued. Lyra Blackwood had responded to their financial crisis with intellectual maturity and analytical capabilities that exceeded normal 11-year-old cognitive development, transforming her into an essential household management partner, despite her chronological age and the psychological burden associated with understanding that their family's continued housing stability depended on precise budgeting decisions and resource conservation strategies that required mathematical sophistication and emotional resilience typically associated with adult responsibilities rather than childhood experiences. Her personality reflected a unique combination of her mother's scientific methodology and systematic problem-solving approaches with natural mechanical curiosity and observational skills that had been enhanced through participation in advanced academic programs and science enrichment activities that had developed her capacity for analytical thinking and hypothesis testing that made her particularly effective at identifying household inefficiencies and developing innovative solutions that conventional adult thinking might overlook due to established assumptions about standard procedures and traditional approaches. Lyra's academic performance had consistently placed her in the top percentiles of standardized testing and advanced placement programs that provided enrichment opportunities beyond standard elementary curriculum, including participation in science fair competitions, mathematics Olympiad preparation, and robotics club activities that had developed her understanding of engineering principles, logical reasoning, and systematic investigation methods that characterize scientific inquiry and technological problem-solving approaches. Her teachers had repeatedly recommended acceleration into advanced academic tracks and gifted education programs that would provide intellectual challenges and educational opportunities appropriate to her cognitive capabilities and learning preferences. But their financial situation had made participation in specialized programs and educational enrichment activities financially impossible due to associated costs for materials, transportation, and supplementary instruction that characterized advanced educational opportunities beyond standard public school offerings. Lyra's comprehension of their desperate circumstances was both comprehensive and developmentally inappropriate. She monitored their declining financial resources through shared access to online banking systems that Cassandra had provided to facilitate collaborative budget management, conducted independent research about emergency assistance programs using school computer laboratory internet access, and maintained detailed documentation of their monthly obligations, debt accumulation, and projected timelines that calculated exactly when their remaining assets would be exhausted if alternative income sources weren't secured through employment or entrepreneurial activities.
The 11-year-old had voluntarily assumed responsibilities for meal planning and grocery budget optimization that involved complex calculations about nutritional density per dollar spent, comparison shopping methodologies that maximized purchasing power while maintaining adequate nutrition for growing children and job-searching adults, and inventory management systems that prevented food waste while ensuring their household maintained sufficient calorie intake for sustained energy and cognitive function required for interview preparation and academic performance. Her meal planning approach had incorporated understanding of nutritional requirements, dietary balance, and food preparation techniques that demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of health science and practical cooking skills that had been developed through independent research and experimentation when their reduced food budget had required maximizing nutritional value while minimizing expenses through strategic shopping and efficient food utilization that prevented waste while maintaining adequate nutrition for both physical health and cognitive performance. Additionally, Lyra had developed systematic approaches to utility conservation and household expense reduction that included detailed monitoring of electricity usage patterns, water consumption tracking, and identification of discretionary spending categories that could be eliminated without compromising essential needs or safety requirements that characterized responsible household management during extended financial emergencies when every dollar represented critical resource allocation decisions affecting their family's immediate survival prospects. Her utility conservation methods had included research into energy-efficient practices, appliance usage optimization, and behavior modifications that could reduce monthly expenses without requiring capital investment or equipment replacement that their financial situation couldn't accommodate, demonstrating understanding of resource management principles and environmental science concepts that exceeded typical elementary school educational content and practical application capabilities. The systematic documentation that Lyra maintained included detailed tracking of their monthly expenses, debt obligations, assistance program applications, and timeline calculations that showed exactly when their remaining resources would be exhausted if alternative income sources weren't secured, creating comprehensive financial management systems that provided clear understanding of their crisis timeline and resource allocation requirements that would be necessary for survival and stability achievement. Her documentation methods had incorporated spreadsheet applications, graphical analysis, and projection modeling that demonstrated proficiency with technology applications and mathematical concepts that characterized advanced analytical capabilities and systematic thinking approaches that enabled effective crisis management and strategic planning despite their desperate circumstances and limited resources available for addressing their survival requirements and housing security needs. Cassandra's job search efforts had been exhaustive and strategically focused, including applications to pharmaceutical companies, research institutions, biotechnology startups, academic medical centers, government research agencies, and consulting firms, whose employment opportunities had been restricted by hiring freezes, budget constraints, and preference for junior researchers whose salary requirements aligned with reduced funding allocations that had characterized the biomedical industry's response to economic pressures and regulatory changes affecting pharmaceutical development and research commercialization. The comprehensive nature of her search had included networking activities within professional organizations such as the American Society of Biomedical Engineers, the International Society of Pharmaceutical Engineers, and the Arizona Bioindustry Association, participation in industry conferences and symposiums, including the annual Biomedical Engineering Society Conference and the Phoenix Life Sciences Summit, collaboration with recruitment specialists who specialized in biotechnology placements, and pursuit of consulting opportunities that could provide temporary income while maintaining professional connections and industry visibility. Her networking efforts had generated multiple informational interviews and professional consultations that had provided insight into industry conditions and employment trends, but had consistently revealed that available positions either required relocation to other metropolitan areas where her family's financial situation made housing deposits and moving expenses impossible, or offered compensation levels that were insufficient to support their household expenses and debt obligations while providing the income stability necessary for maintaining housing security and meeting basic survival requirements. The consulting opportunities that had been explored included project-based research assignments, technical writing positions, regulatory compliance consulting, and expert witness services for patent litigation that could utilize her specialized expertise while providing flexible scheduling that would accommodate continued job searching and family responsibilities, but had generated insufficient income to address their immediate financial crisis or provide sustainable long-term employment security that would enable financial recovery and stability.
Government assistance programs had provided minimal support due to eligibility requirements and bureaucratic procedures that assumed temporary unemployment rather than industry-wide career disruption affecting professionals whose previous income levels exceeded assistance program thresholds, while current circumstances required support levels that weren't available through existing social safety net programs designed for different demographic populations and economic situations that didn't account for professional career disruption and specialized employment challenges. The assistance programs that had been investigated included temporary assistance for needy families, supplemental nutrition assistance program, women, infants, and children nutrition program, low-income home energy assistance program, and various local emergency assistance funds that provided limited financial support but required extensive documentation, waiting periods, and ongoing compliance requirements that consumed significant time and energy while providing insufficient assistance to address their comprehensive financial crisis and housing security needs. The city tax auction notification had been discovered among accumulated mail during the fourth week of February 2024, announcing public sales of tax-delinquent commercial properties whose previous owners had abandoned rather than maintain ongoing municipal tax obligations and utility payments that exceeded properties' assessed values in Phoenix's economically distressed commercial zones, where business failures and economic decline had created acquisition opportunities for buyers willing to accept renovation responsibilities and ongoing municipal compliance obligations.
The tax auction represented Phoenix's annual effort to return abandoned commercial properties to productive use while recovering accumulated municipal obligations and property taxes that previous owners had failed to pay due to business failures, economic decline, or property abandonment that had left the city responsible for maintenance costs and lost tax revenue that affected municipal budget planning and public service provision throughout economically distressed commercial districts that required revitalization and economic development. Cassandra's evaluation of available auction properties had identified the abandoned Greyhound bus depot on Van Buren Street as potentially suitable for biomedical consulting business development, offering laboratory-appropriate electrical infrastructure, climate control capabilities, and sufficient space for equipment installation and client consultation areas that could enable independent practice establishment rather than continued dependence on employment applications that had consistently failed to generate interviews despite her qualifications and professional references documenting reliable performance and technical innovation. The bus depot facility had been vacated in 2020 when Greyhound had consolidated regional operations and eliminated intercity routes that had made the Phoenix location economically unsustainable during pandemic-related travel restrictions and changing transportation preferences that have reduced demand for bus travel while increasing operational costs and regulatory compliance requirements that made smaller facilities economically unviable for continued commercial transportation operations. The property consisted of an 18,000 square foot building with loading facilities, maintenance areas, administrative offices, passenger waiting areas, and storage spaces that city property records indicated could be acquired for accumulated tax liabilities totaling $1,247 in back taxes, municipal fees, administrative costs, and utility arrearages that represented the majority of Cassandra's remaining financial resources, but offered possibilities for business ownership and income generation that traditional employment applications had failed to provide. Her preliminary assessment of the facility had revealed infrastructure elements that could support biomedical consulting operations, including three-phase electrical service that could power laboratory equipment, climate control systems that could maintain environmental conditions required for sensitive instruments and biological materials, and office spaces that could be configured for client consultations and administrative activities that would characterize professional consulting services and research coordination activities. The building's construction had occurred in 1967, according to municipal records, utilizing commercial-grade materials and engineering specifications that had provided structural durability and infrastructure capability that exceeded typical commercial building standards, while incorporating design features that could accommodate heavy equipment loads, specialized ventilation requirements, and security measures that would be appropriate for professional biomedical consulting operations and sensitive research activities.
Additionally, the property's location provided convenient access to major transportation corridors and proximity to Phoenix's medical district and research institutions that could facilitate client accessibility and professional networking opportunities, while offering adequate parking and building accessibility that would meet requirements for professional services and client interaction that characterized legitimate biomedical consulting operations and research collaboration activities. Her decision to participate in the tax auction process had been motivated by recognition that conventional job search strategies had proven ineffective for generating employment opportunities that could support her family's survival timeline, making property acquisition and entrepreneurial business development her primary remaining option for achieving income levels sufficient to prevent displacement while maintaining professional independence and utilizing her specialized expertise in ways that employment opportunities within Arizona's contracted biomedical industry couldn't accommodate. The auction proceedings had been conducted in the Civic Center Conference Facility of Phoenix's municipal complex,
attended by approximately 45 potential purchasers examining property documentation and conducting preliminary assessments of commercial buildings whose abandonment had created acquisition opportunities for entrepreneurs and investors willing to assume renovation costs and ongoing municipal obligations in exchange for ownership of potentially valuable real estate whose market appreciation could exceed purchase prices if economic development and neighborhood revitalization occurred during subsequent ownership periods. The auction process had been administered by Phoenix's Treasury Department with assistance from city planning officials who provided technical information about zoning requirements, building code compliance, and municipal service availability that prospective buyers needed to evaluate acquisition decisions and understand ongoing obligations associated with commercial property ownership and business operation within municipal jurisdiction and regulatory framework that governed commercial activities and property development. Cassandra had been among only 3 bidders expressing interest in the bus depot when the auctioneer presented property specifications and minimum bid requirements, enabling her to secure ownership for exactly $1 plus $1,246 in accumulated municipal obligations that consumed virtually all of her available financial resources, but provided her family with commercial property ownership and business development possibilities that could generate sufficient income to achieve housing stability and prevent the displacement that conventional employment had failed to address through normal job search activities. The acquisition process had required immediate payment of all accumulated municipal obligations plus registration fees and documentation costs that had been completed using her final unemployment benefit payment and small remaining savings that had been preserved for emergency situations, leaving her family with property ownership but no liquid assets for renovation activities or business development expenses that would be required to transform the abandoned facility into functional space suitable for biomedical consulting operations and client services. Following successful property acquisition, Cassandra had conducted initial facility assessment that revealed extensive maintenance requirements and infrastructure challenges that exceeded her technical expertise and available financial resources, including electrical system upgrades, plumbing repairs, climate control restoration, security improvements, and building envelope restoration that would be necessary before the building could be occupied safely or configured for professional use that would meet regulatory requirements and client expectations for biomedical consulting services. The building's interior had been stripped of valuable fixtures and equipment during the abandonment period, leaving empty spaces with damaged flooring, deteriorated wall surfaces, and evidence of weather infiltration that had occurred through compromised roofing and window systems that required comprehensive repair and restoration before the facility could provide suitable environment for sensitive equipment installation and professional activities that characterized legitimate biomedical consulting operations and client interaction. Additionally, the property's compliance status with municipal building codes and zoning regulations required investigation and potential remediation that could involve permit applications, inspection procedures, and modification requirements that would necessitate additional expenses and regulatory compliance activities that Cassandra's financial situation and technical background hadn't prepared her to address independently without professional assistance that would require expenditures beyond her current resource capacity. The building's structural integrity appeared sound according to her preliminary assessment, but required professional engineering evaluation to verify load-bearing capacity and identify any hidden structural issues that could affect renovation planning and operational safety, while the building systems, including electrical, plumbing, and HVAC, required comprehensive inspection and potential replacement that would represent significant capital investment beyond her immediate financial capabilities.
Lyra's initial reaction to their property acquisition had been characterized by excitement about business ownership possibilities and enthusiasm for renovation project participation that reflected her mechanical curiosity and desire to contribute meaningfully to their family's crisis resolution through practical activities that could utilize her analytical skills and problem-solving capabilities in ways that school assignments and normal childhood activities couldn't accommodate during their extended emergency situation and survival planning requirements. The first week of March 2024 had brought unseasonably cold temperatures to Phoenix that stressed the abandoned bus depot's aging infrastructure in ways that revealed the building's most urgent maintenance requirements, while simultaneously providing Cassandra and Lyra their initial opportunity to explore the facility's complete layout and identify renovation priorities that would determine whether their desperate property acquisition could realistically be transformed into viable business space within their non-existent budget and compressed timeline for achieving income generation before their apartment lease termination and family displacement. Cassandra's systematic building assessment had been conducted using borrowed tools and equipment that she had acquired through coordination with former colleagues and professional contacts who understood her desperate situation and were willing to provide temporary assistance with basic maintenance supplies, measuring instruments, and safety equipment that enabled comprehensive evaluation of the facility's structural condition, infrastructure status, and renovation requirements that would determine the feasibility of their entrepreneurial venture and business development plans. The building's electrical system had been her primary concern due to the sophisticated power requirements that would be necessary for biomedical consulting operations and laboratory equipment that characterized her intended business model, requiring three-phase electrical service, dedicated laboratory circuits, and emergency backup power capabilities that would ensure operational continuity and equipment protection during power outages or electrical disturbances that could compromise sensitive research activities and client services. Her electrical assessment had been revealed that the original 1967 installation included heavy-duty electrical infrastructure that exceeded typical commercial building capabilities, with distribution panels and conduit systems that suggested the facility had been designed to support industrial equipment and operational requirements that were significantly more demanding than normal bus depot functions and passenger services that would have characterized typical Greyhound transportation facilities during the building's original construction and operational periods. The electrical infrastructure included dedicated high-voltage circuits, specialized grounding systems, and equipment mounting capabilities that indicated previous installation of sophisticated machinery and electronic systems that required electrical specifications exceeding normal commercial building standards, while incorporating security features and access controls that weren't typical of standard transportation facilities and passenger service operations that characterized legitimate bus depot functionality and commercial transportation infrastructure. Additionally, the electrical distribution systems showed evidence of modification and upgrade activities that had occurred during different time periods using materials and installation techniques that differed from original construction methods, suggesting systematic enhancement and expansion of electrical capabilities through professional electrical work that exceeded normal maintenance and repair activities while incorporating specialized features that weren't documented in available municipal records or building permit documentation. Lyra's participation in the electrical assessment had been characterized by systematic documentation and analytical observation that reflected her scientific methodology and mechanical curiosity, creating detailed inventories of electrical components, circuit configurations, and infrastructure elements that enabled comprehensive understanding of the building's electrical capabilities and renovation requirements, while identifying anomalies and inconsistencies that suggested historical uses beyond normal commercial transportation operations. Her documentation methods had included photographing electrical panels and distribution systems, measuring circuit capacities and load requirements, and researching electrical code compliance and safety standards that would be necessary for legitimate business operations and regulatory approval that characterized professional consulting services and laboratory activities requiring electrical infrastructure capable of supporting sensitive equipment and operational continuity requirements. The 11-year-old's electrical knowledge had been developed through independent research and educational enrichment activities that included electronics projects, science fair participation, and advanced mathematics programs that had provided understanding of electrical principles, circuit analysis, and safety procedures that enabled meaningful contribution to their building assessment, while ensuring her participation in electrical evaluation activities maintained appropriate safety protocols and adult supervision.
Her systematic approach to electrical documentation had revealed wiring configurations and circuit routing that didn't correspond to normal building layouts or logical electrical distribution patterns that characterize typical commercial construction, with electrical pathways and equipment locations that suggested specialized requirements and security considerations that weren't typical of standard commercial building electrical systems and infrastructure development. The building's plumbing systems had presented similar challenges and anomalies during Cassandra's assessment activities, with water distribution networks and drainage systems that exceeded normal commercial building requirements while incorporating features that suggested specialized industrial applications and operational requirements that weren't consistent with typical bus depot functionality and passenger services that would have characterized the facility's documented historical use and commercial transportation operations. The plumbing infrastructure included heavy-duty water supply lines, specialized drainage systems, and equipment connections that indicated previous installation of industrial machinery and processing equipment that required substantial water consumption and waste management capabilities that exceeded normal commercial building requirements, while incorporating environmental controls and safety features that weren't typical of standard transportation facilities and passenger service operations. Additionally, the plumbing systems showed evidence of modification and expansion activities that had been completed using professional installation techniques and premium materials that indicated significant investment in infrastructure enhancement and operational capability expansion through specialized plumbing work that exceeded normal maintenance and repair activities while incorporating features that required regulatory compliance and environmental protection measures. Lyra's investigation of plumbing systems had been conducted with appropriate safety precautions and adult supervision, while utilizing her analytical capabilities and systematic documentation methods to identify infrastructure elements and operational features that contributed to understanding of the building's complete configuration and historical uses that weren't reflected in available municipal records or property documentation that characterized their acquisition and ownership transfer processes. Her plumbing assessment had included evaluation of water pressure and flow rates, investigation of drainage capacity and waste management systems, and research into plumbing code requirements and regulatory compliance that would be necessary for legitimate business operations and professional consulting services that required reliable water supply and waste management capabilities that characterized biomedical consulting operations and laboratory activities. The systematic investigation of plumbing infrastructure had revealed water distribution patterns and drainage configurations that didn't correspond to normal commercial building layouts or logical plumbing system design that characterized typical construction practices, with pipe routing and equipment locations that suggested specialized operational requirements and security considerations that weren't typical of standard commercial building plumbing systems and infrastructure development. During the second week of March, Lyra's basement investigation had begun as practical necessity for evaluating foundational stability and infrastructure access that would be required for renovation planning and cost estimation, but had evolved into comprehensive investigation of architectural features and construction elements that revealed significant inconsistencies between the building's actual configuration and official municipal records that documented its construction and historical use patterns. The basement level had been accessed through a standard stairway from the main floor administrative area, leading to what municipal records described as simple storage space and mechanical equipment areas that supported building operations and maintenance activities. But Lyra's systematic exploration had revealed space utilization and construction features that exceeded normal basement functionality while incorporating elements that suggested specialized operational requirements and security measures. Her basement investigation had been conducted using flashlights and borrowed safety equipment while maintaining communication with Cassandra, who monitored her exploration activities from the main floor level, ensuring appropriate safety protocols while enabling comprehensive assessment of basement conditions and infrastructure elements that would affect renovation planning and business development activities that characterized their entrepreneurial venture and income generation requirements. The basement construction had included reinforced concrete walls and flooring that exceeded normal building foundation requirements,
with structural elements and load-bearing capabilities that indicated the space had been designed to support heavy equipment and operational activities that required enhanced structural integrity and environmental control beyond normal storage and mechanical equipment functions that characterize typical commercial building basement areas.
Additionally, the basement level had included sophisticated ventilation systems and environmental controls that weren't typical of normal storage areas or mechanical equipment spaces, with air circulation capabilities and atmospheric monitoring equipment that suggested previous operational uses requiring precise environmental control and air quality management that characterized specialized industrial applications and sensitive operational activities rather than simple storage and building maintenance functions. Lyra's systematic documentation of basement features had included measurements and photographs of structural elements, ventilation systems, and infrastructure components that enabled comprehensive understanding of the space's configuration and capabilities while identifying construction details and equipment installations that suggested historical uses beyond normal commercial building functions and municipal record documentation that characterized their property acquisition and ownership transfer. Her investigation methodology had combined scientific observation techniques with practical curiosity about mechanical systems and construction details, enabling identification of architectural anomalies and infrastructure elements that indicated deliberate concealment and specialized construction work that exceeded normal commercial building development while incorporating security features and access controls that weren't documented in available municipal records or building permit documentation. During her systematic basement exploration, Lyra had discovered wall sections that showed different construction materials and techniques compared to surrounding structural elements, with finishing work and installation methods that indicated modification and enhancement activities that had been completed during different time periods using specialized construction approaches that weren't consistent with original building development and normal commercial construction practices and general facility operations that characterize bus depot operations and passenger services. The wall construction anomalies had included sections that utilized different concrete formulations, reinforcement patterns, and finishing techniques that suggested professional construction work performed by specialists with experience in security construction and specialized facility development rather than normal commercial building contractors and standard construction methods that characterize typical basement construction and infrastructure development that would have been appropriate for bus depot operations and passenger services. Her systematic investigation had also revealed ceiling construction that included access panels and equipment mounting points that weren't typical of normal basement areas or mechanical equipment spaces, with infrastructure elements that suggested previous installation of sophisticated equipment and operational systems that required specialized mounting capabilities and environmental controls that characterized advanced technical operations rather than simple storage and building maintenance functions. The ceiling construction had incorporated structural reinforcement and load distribution systems that indicated previous installation of heavy equipment and operational machinery that required substantial structural support and vibration isolation beyond normal mechanical equipment and building systems that characterize typical commercial construction and infrastructure development that would have been appropriate for bus depot operations and passenger services. Additionally, the basement level had included electrical and communication infrastructure that exceeded normal building requirements, with dedicated circuits and equipment connections that suggested previous installation of sophisticated electronic systems and communication equipment that required specialized electrical support and operational capabilities that weren't typical of normal commercial building infrastructure and standard transportation facility operations.
Lyra's investigation of electrical infrastructure had revealed distribution systems and circuit configurations that included security features and access controls that weren't typical of normal basement electrical systems, with specialized equipment connections and monitoring capabilities that suggested previous operational uses requiring electronic surveillance and communication systems that characterized advanced security operations rather than simple building maintenance and commercial transportation functions. The most significant discovery had occurred during Lyra's investigation of what appeared to be a standard mechanical equipment area that municipal records described as housing building heating and cooling systems. But her systematic exploration had revealed that the space contained infrastructure elements and construction features that significantly exceeded normal HVAC equipment requirements, while incorporating specialized features that suggested operational purposes beyond building climate control and environmental management. The mechanical area had included ventilation systems with air filtration capabilities that exceeded normal commercial building requirements, incorporating specialized filters and air purification equipment that suggested previous operational uses requiring precise atmospheric control and contamination prevention that characterized laboratory operations and sensitive technical activities rather than simple building climate control and passenger comfort systems. Additionally, the mechanical area had contained equipment mounting systems and infrastructure elements that indicated previous installation of sophisticated machinery and operational equipment that required specialized environmental controls and operational support beyond normal building mechanical systems, with power distribution and control systems that suggested advanced technical operations rather than simple heating and cooling functions.
Lyra's systematic investigation of the mechanical equipment area had revealed access panels and service connections that weren't documented in available building plans or municipal records, suggesting concealed infrastructure and operational capabilities that had been systematically hidden from official documentation and regulatory oversight that would normally be required for commercial building operations and municipal compliance activities. Her investigation had also revealed that certain wall sections within the mechanical equipment area responded differently to impact testing and showed construction characteristics that suggested concealed spaces and hidden access points that weren't visible during casual inspection, but that systematic investigation could identify through careful analysis of construction details and structural elements that indicated deliberate concealment and specialized construction work. The discovery of concealed access points had prompted more extensive investigation using borrowed tools and equipment that enabled systematic testing of wall construction and structural elements throughout the mechanical equipment area, revealing that several wall sections contained hidden panels and access mechanisms that required specific manipulation techniques to activate properly without damaging concealment features that had been engineered to prevent casual discovery. Lyra's systematic testing had eventually revealed activation sequences that enabled access to concealed spaces behind what appeared to be permanent wall construction, demonstrating that the mechanical equipment area contained hidden areas and specialized infrastructure that had been systematically concealed from normal building inspection and municipal oversight through sophisticated construction techniques and concealment methods that exceeded normal commercial building development. The concealed spaces had contained infrastructure elements and equipment installations that clearly indicated previous operational uses requiring specialized technical capabilities and security measures that weren't consistent with normal commercial building functions and bus depot operations that would have characterized the facility's documented historical use and municipal record documentation that had been available during their property acquisition and ownership transfer processes.
The infrastructure within concealed areas had included electrical systems, communication equipment, and environmental controls that indicated sophisticated operational capabilities and technical requirements that exceeded anything justified by normal commercial transportation functions, while incorporating security features and access controls that suggested highly specialized and potentially sensitive operational activities that required absolute concealment from official oversight and public knowledge. Lyra's documentation of concealed infrastructure included photographs and measurements that provided comprehensive evidence of specialized construction and equipment installation that clearly exceeded normal commercial building capabilities, while incorporating features that indicated previous operational uses requiring advanced technical support and security measures that weren't documented in available municipal records or building permit documentation. Her systematic approach to documenting concealed discoveries had combined scientific methodology with practical investigation techniques that enabled comprehensive understanding of the facility's actual configuration and capabilities, while maintaining detailed records that could support further investigation and analysis of the building's complete history and previous operational uses that weren't reflected in official documentation and municipal records. The discovery of concealed infrastructure and specialized construction had prompted Cassandra to conduct her own investigation of the concealed areas and hidden infrastructure that Lyra had documented, confirming that their property acquisition had provided them with a facility that contained sophisticated technical capabilities and specialized construction that significantly exceeded anything justified by normal commercial transportation operations and bus depot functionality. Cassandra's professional assessment of the concealed infrastructure had revealed equipment installations and operational capabilities that indicated previous uses requiring advanced technical expertise and specialized operational procedures that were consistent with research and development activities rather than commercial transportation services, suggesting that the facility had been systematically modified and enhanced for purposes that weren't documented in available municipal records or property documentation. Her analysis of electrical and communication systems within concealed areas had indicated sophisticated operational capabilities that included data processing equipment, communication networks, and environmental monitoring systems that were consistent with advanced research facilities and technical operations that required specialized infrastructure and security measures beyond anything justified by normal commercial building functions and transportation operations. The systematic investigation of concealed areas had also revealed storage systems and equipment installations that indicated previous operational uses involving materials handling and processing activities that required specialized containment and environmental controls beyond normal commercial building capabilities, suggesting that the facility had been used for technical operations that required advanced safety measures and operational procedures.
Additionally, the concealed infrastructure had included access systems and security measures that indicated previous operational uses requiring controlled access and personnel monitoring that weren't consistent with normal commercial building operations or public transportation services that would have characterized legitimate bus depot functionality and passenger services that municipal records documented as the facility's historical use and operational purpose. The discovery of sophisticated concealed infrastructure had raised immediate questions about the facility's complete history and previous operational uses that weren't documented in available municipal records, suggesting that significant activities had been conducted within the building during ownership periods that required systematic concealment from official oversight and public knowledge through specialized construction and infrastructure development that exceeded normal commercial building capabilities. Cassinger's recognition that their property acquisition had provided them with a facility containing unexplained infrastructure and specialized construction had created both opportunities and concerns about their situation, as the concealed capabilities could potentially support their biomedical consulting business development while simultaneously raising questions about previous activities and potential regulatory compliance issues that could affect their ability to operate legitimate business activities within the facility.
The investigation of concealed infrastructure had also revealed that their desperate property acquisition had connected them to historical activities and operational capabilities that extended far beyond normal commercial real estate ownership, potentially providing them with resources and capabilities that could address their financial crisis while simultaneously exposing them to unknown risks and complications associated with the facility's actual history and previous uses that weren't reflected in official documentation and municipal records that had characterized their acquisition process. The third week of March had brought the discovery that would transform Cassandra and Lyra's desperate property acquisition from a questionable business venture into something that challenged every assumption about the facility's documented history and legitimate commercial purposes, when Lyra's systematic investigation of the concealed access panels revealed entry points to underground chambers that municipal records categorically denied existed beneath the building, containing preserved documentation and equipment that proved the bus depot had served as a covert research facility for classified government operations that extended far beyond anything suggested by the sophisticated infrastructure they had already discovered. Lyra's successful activation of the concealed access mechanisms had required 3 days of systematic experimentation with different manipulation techniques and sequential operations that combined her analytical problem-solving approach with persistent mechanical curiosity that enabled her to identify the precise timing and pressure combinations necessary to operate hidden panels without triggering security features that had been designed to prevent unauthorized access, while enabling legitimate users to enter concealed areas through procedures that required specific knowledge and technical understanding. The activation sequence had involved simultaneous manipulation of electrical switches concealed within false wall panels, mechanical pressure points hidden beneath removable floor sections, and rotational mechanisms integrated into what appeared to be standard building fixtures, demonstrating engineering sophistication and security design that exceeded anything justified by normal commercial building protection, while incorporating features that required coordinated operation by multiple individuals with detailed knowledge of access procedures and security protocols. When the concealed access systems finally responded to Lyra's persistent investigation and systematic testing, the result had been revelation of a stairway descending approximately 15 feet below the basement level into chambers that had been excavated from solid bedrock using professional mining techniques and construction methods that indicated substantial resource investment and specialized expertise that wouldn't have been available for normal commercial building development during the facility's documented construction period. The underground chambers had been accessed through a reinforced steel door system that incorporated multiple locking mechanisms and security features, including electronic access controls, mechanical deadbolts, and emergency sealing capabilities that indicated the concealed areas had been designed to contain sensitive materials and operational activities while providing absolute security from unauthorized access and potential security breaches that could compromise operational security and classified materials protection. Cassandra's initial assessment of the underground facility had revealed construction quality and engineering sophistication that exceeded anything she had encountered during her biomedical research career, with environmental controls, structural reinforcement, and infrastructure capabilities that indicated the concealed chambers had been designed to support advanced technical operations requiring laboratory-quality environmental control and operational security that characterized classified research facilities rather than commercial building auxiliary space.
The underground construction had incorporated professional geological engineering and excavation techniques that enabled creation of permanent facilities within Arizona's challenging soil conditions and bedrock formations, demonstrating resource investment and technical expertise that would have required coordination with specialized contractors and engineering firms, whose capabilities exceeded normal commercial construction industry resources and standard building development practices. The primary underground chamber measured approximately 40 feet in length and 25 feet in width, with ceiling heights that provided comfortable working space while maintaining structural integrity through reinforced concrete construction and steel support systems that enabled long-term occupancy and equipment operation within environmental conditions that had been precisely controlled through sophisticated ventilation and atmospheric management systems that maintained laboratory-quality air purity and contamination prevention. The chamber's environmental controls had included air filtration systems with multiple redundancy levels, atmospheric monitoring equipment that maintained precise temperature and humidity specifications, and contamination prevention measures that indicated previous operational uses involving biological specimens and chemical compounds that required absolute environmental control and safety protocols that characterized advanced research facilities and classified laboratory operations rather than normal commercial or academic research activities. Additionally, the primary chamber had contained equipment mounting systems and infrastructure elements that indicated previous installation of sophisticated research instruments and analytical equipment that required specialized electrical power, environmental isolation, and operational support that characterized advanced biomedical research and scientific investigation activities that required laboratory-quality facilities and technical capabilities that exceeded normal commercial building infrastructure and operational requirements. Lyra's systematic documentation of the underground facility had revealed that the primary chamber connected to additional rooms and specialized areas through a corridor system that extended beyond the immediate excavation, suggesting that the concealed facility encompassed substantially more space and operational capability than their initial discovery had indicated, while incorporating design features that enabled expansion and modification of operational areas according to research requirements and security considerations. The corridor system had been constructed using the same professional excavation and engineering techniques that characterized the primary chamber, with structural reinforcement and environmental controls that enabled safe passage and operational access throughout the underground facility, while maintaining security features and access controls that could isolate different areas and restrict access according to operational requirements and security classifications that govern different research activities and materials handling procedures. Her investigation of the corridor system had revealed access points to 3 additional chambers whose construction and configuration indicated specialized operational purposes, including material storage, equipment operation, and data processing activities that required dedicated space and environmental controls beyond the capabilities provided by the primary chamber, while incorporating security measures that enabled controlled access and operational isolation according to research protocols and security requirements. The first additional chamber had been configured as a materials storage facility with environmental controls and containment systems that indicated previous use for biological specimens and chemical compounds that required specialized storage conditions and safety protocols, including refrigeration capabilities, atmospheric controls, and containment measures that characterized advanced laboratory operations and research activities involving sensitive materials and hazardous substances that required professional handling and safety procedures. The storage chamber had contained specialized equipment, including laboratory refrigeration units, chemical storage cabinets, and biological containment systems that demonstrated previous operational use for research activities requiring materials handling and storage capabilities that exceeded normal laboratory infrastructure, while incorporating safety features and environmental controls that characterized classified research operations and government facility standards rather than normal commercial or academic research activities.
Additionally, the storage chamber had included inventory management systems and documentation procedures that indicated systematic tracking and control of materials and specimens that required detailed record-keeping and accountability measures consistent with government research protocols and security requirements that govern classified materials handling and operational accountability within sensitive research environments and federal facility operations. The second additional chamber had been equipped as an operational laboratory with scientific instruments and analytical equipment that demonstrated previous use for advanced biomedical research and technical analysis activities that required sophisticated instrumentation and operational capabilities that exceeded normal commercial laboratory infrastructure while incorporating security features and access controls that characterized classified research facilities and government operations.
The laboratory equipment had included electron microscopy systems, DNA sequencing instruments, protein analysis capabilities, and biochemical processing equipment that indicated research activities involving genetic analysis, molecular biology, and pharmaceutical development that required advanced technical capabilities and specialized expertise that characterized cutting-edge biomedical research and pharmaceutical development activities that would have required substantial funding and institutional support. Additionally, the laboratory chamber had contained data processing systems and communication equipment that enabled real-time monitoring and analysis of research activities while providing secure communication capabilities and data transmission that indicated coordination with external research institutions and government agencies whose involvement in research activities required absolute security and operational confidentiality that characterized classified research programs and federal agency coordination. The third additional chamber had been configured as a data processing and communication center with computer systems and electronic equipment that indicated previous use for information analysis and secure communication activities that required advanced technical capabilities and security measures that characterized intelligence operations and classified data processing rather than normal research support and administrative functions that would have been appropriate for legitimate scientific research activities. The data processing equipment had included mainframe computer systems, secure communication networks, and information analysis capabilities that demonstrated operational use for intelligence gathering and data analysis activities that required advanced technical capabilities and security measures that exceeded normal research facility requirements while incorporating features that characterized federal intelligence operations and classified information processing activities. Cassandra's professional assessment of the underground laboratory equipment had revealed instrumentation and analytical capabilities that indicated research activities involving human subjects and biological experimentation that required advanced biomedical equipment and specialized procedures that characterized medical research and pharmaceutical development, but had incorporated security measures and operational isolation that suggested activities that were conducted without normal regulatory oversight and institutional accountability that characterized legitimate medical research and pharmaceutical development. Additionally, the laboratory equipment had included psychological assessment instruments and behavioral monitoring systems that indicated research activities involving mental health evaluation and cognitive analysis that extended beyond normal medical research to encompass psychological experimentation and behavioral modification activities that required specialized equipment and operational procedures that weren't consistent with legitimate medical research and ethical scientific investigation. The most disturbing discovery had been filing cabinets and storage systems throughout the underground facility that contained comprehensive documentation of research activities and operational procedures that proved the bus depot had served as a covert research facility for a classified government program designated Operation Mindbridge that had conducted systematic human experimentation and psychological manipulation activities between 1963 and 1987 without consent or knowledge of subjects who had been systematically targeted and recruited through deceptive procedures and fraudulent medical programs.
The Operation Mindbridge documentation had included research protocols and experimental procedures that detailed systematic human experimentation involving pharmaceutical testing, psychological manipulation, and behavioral modification activities that had been conducted on unwilling subjects who had been systematically deceived about the nature and purposes of their participation, while being subjected to treatments and procedures that violated medical ethics and human rights standards that governed legitimate medical research and scientific investigation. The research documentation had revealed that Operation Mindbridge had been conducted under the authority of the Central Intelligence Agency in coordination with pharmaceutical companies and medical institutions that had provided research expertise and operational support for human experimentation activities that were designed to develop mind control techniques and behavioral manipulation capabilities for intelligence and military applications that required testing on human subjects without their knowledge or consent. The program documentation had included detailed records of over 15,000 individual cases involving subjects who had been systematically recruited through fraudulent medical programs, employment opportunities, and social services that had provided access to vulnerable populations, including military personnel, hospital patients, prison inmates, and economically disadvantaged individuals who had been targeted for experimentation without their knowledge while being told they were receiving legitimate medical treatment or participating in beneficial research programs.
Lyra's systematic review of the research documentation had revealed that Operation Mindbridge subjects had been subjected to experimental procedures, including pharmaceutical testing with unknown drugs, psychological manipulation through sensory deprivation and behavior modification, surgical procedures involving brain implants and neural monitoring, and systematic torture designed to induce psychological trauma and facilitate behavioral control that exceeded anything justified by legitimate medical research or scientific investigation. The subject files had contained comprehensive documentation of individual cases, including personal background information, experimental procedures, psychological assessment results, and outcome measurements that demonstrated systematic tracking and analysis of human experimentation effects while maintaining detailed records that enabled research continuity and data analysis throughout extended experimental periods that had involved years of systematic abuse and psychological manipulation. Additionally, the documentation had revealed that Operation Mindbridge had been coordinated with multiple federal agencies, including the Department of Defense, Veterans Administration, and National Institutes of Health, that had provided institutional support and research coordination for human experimentation activities while maintaining operational security and public denial that prevented exposure of illegal activities and human rights violations that characterized the program's systematic abuse of research subjects. The program documentation had also included correspondence with pharmaceutical companies, including major corporations whose names appeared in contemporary medical research and drug development, proving that legitimate medical institutions and commercial enterprises had provided research support and experimental materials for human experimentation activities while maintaining institutional protection and legal immunity through classified program status and government coordination that prevented accountability and legal consequences that characterized the program's systematic abuse of research subjects. The pharmaceutical documentation had also included correspondence with medical examiner offices and coroner departments that had falsified death certificates and autopsy reports for subjects who had died during experimental procedures, systematic suppression of medical records and research documentation that could expose illegal activities, and coordination with legal authorities that prevented investigation and prosecution of research personnel whose activities violated federal law and international human rights standards. Additionally, the cover-up activities had included systematic intimidation and elimination of witnesses and research personnel who had attempted to expose illegal activities
or withdraw from program participation, with documentation proving that Operation Mindbridge had utilized violence and systematic intimidation to maintain operational security while preventing exposure of activities that would have triggered federal investigation and international accountability proceedings. The documentation had also revealed that family members of subjects who had died during experimental procedures had been systematically deceived through falsified medical explanations and fraudulent death investigations that prevented accurate determination of death causes while providing institutional protection for research personnel and government agencies whose activities had resulted in systematic murder and human rights violations that would have triggered federal prosecution and international accountability.
Lyra's comprehensive review of the cover-up documentation had revealed that Operation Mindbridge had been protected through systematic coordination with multiple federal agencies and institutional authorities that had provided legal immunity and operational protection while preventing congressional oversight and public accountability that would have exposed the program's systematic violation of federal law and international human rights standards that governed medical research and government activities. The protection mechanisms had included coordination with federal law enforcement agencies that had prevented investigation of suspicious deaths and illegal activities, systematic suppression of congressional inquiries and oversight activities through classified program status and national security claims, and coordination with media organizations that had prevented public reporting and exposure of activities that would have triggered public outrage and demands for accountability and legal prosecution. The systematic nature of institutional protection and cover-up activities had demonstrated that Operation Mindbridge represented only one component of a comprehensive human experimentation program that had been conducted through multiple facilities and institutional partnerships throughout the southwestern United States between 1955 and 1991. With coordination centers in Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, Las Vegas, and Denver that had enabled systematic research activities involving thousands of unwilling subjects while maintaining operational security through federal agency protection and institutional conspiracy that prevented exposure and accountability for nearly 4 decades of systematic human rights violations. The multi-facility coordination had been documented through communication records and administrative correspondence that proved systematic planning and resource sharing among research locations that had enabled comprehensive human experimentation programs while maintaining operational security through compartmentalized activities and limited information access that characterized compartmentalized intelligence operations and classified research programs that required absolute secrecy and security measures. Additionally, the multi-facility network had enabled systematic data sharing and research coordination that had maximized the scientific value and operational utility of human experimentation results, while maintaining institutional protection through federal agency oversight and classified program status that prevented congressional investigation and public accountability for activities that violated federal law and international human rights standards governing medical research and government activities. The institutional coordination had extended beyond government research facilities to encompass major universities and medical research institutions whose participation in Operation Mindbridge had provided academic legitimacy and research expertise, while enabling systematic integration of illegal research results into legitimate scientific investigation and medical education that had influenced generations of medical professionals and research scientists whose training and professional development had been systematically contaminated by knowledge and techniques derived from illegal human experimentation. The university participation had been documented through research contracts and coordination agreements with institutions including Arizona State University, University of Arizona, Stanford University, Harvard Medical School, and Johns Hopkins University, whose faculty and research programs had provided expertise and institutional support for human experimentation activities while receiving federal funding and research data that had contributed to academic advancement and institutional prestige derived from systematic abuse of human subjects in violation of medical ethics. The academic institutional involvement had included systematic recruitment of graduate students and research personnel who had been systematically deceived about the nature and purposes of their research participation while being trained in experimental techniques and research methods that incorporated knowledge and procedures derived from illegal human experimentation, creating ongoing institutional contamination and professional compromise that continued to influence contemporary medical research and academic investigation. Cassandra's analysis of university documentation had revealed that academic participation in Operation Mindbridge had been coordinated through classified research contracts and institutional agreements that had provided substantial federal funding for medical research programs while requiring absolute secrecy and operational security that prevented academic oversight and ethical review that would have exposed illegal activities and prevented institutional participation in systematic human rights violations. The academic coordination had also included systematic suppression of research ethics and oversight mechanisms within participating institutions through federal pressure and funding dependencies that had compromised institutional integrity and professional standards while enabling ongoing participation in activities that violated academic ethical standards and professional responsibilities that governed legitimate medical research and scientific investigation within university settings. The pharmaceutical industry participation in Operation Mindbridge had been even more systematic and comprehensive than academic involvement, encompassing major corporations, including Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Bristol-Myers, and Eli Lilly, whose research and development activities had been systematically coordinated with government human experimentation programs to enable commercial drug development and pharmaceutical research that had generated billions of dollars in revenue from knowledge and products derived from illegal human experimentation and systematic abuse of unwilling research subjects. The pharmaceutical coordination had included systematic provision of experimental drugs and research materials for human testing without regulatory oversight or safety protocols that would have characterized legitimate pharmaceutical development, enabling corporations to conduct human testing activities that would have been prohibited under normal regulatory frameworks while receiving research data and experimental results that contributed to commercial product development and market advantages derived from illegal human experimentation. The corporate documentation had revealed that pharmaceutical companies had systematically utilized Operation Mindbridge research data and experimental results to develop commercial medications and therapeutic products that had been marketed and sold to the public without disclosure of the illegal origins and unethical procedures that had generated the knowledge and testing data that supported product safety claims and regulatory approval that enabled commercial distribution and corporate profits. Additionally, the pharmaceutical involvement had included systematic coordination with federal agencies to suppress research results and safety data that would have exposed harmful effects and dangerous outcomes associated with experimental drugs and procedures that had been tested on unwilling subjects, enabling corporations to avoid liability and regulatory consequences while maintaining commercial advantages derived from illegal human experimentation and systematic abuse of research subjects. The corporate participation had also extended to systematic funding and institutional support for research facilities and personnel, whose activities had been dedicated to human experimentation and behavioral manipulation research that served both government intelligence objectives and commercial pharmaceutical development, creating ongoing coordination and mutual benefit that had enabled decades of systematic human rights violations while generating substantial profits and institutional advantages for participating corporations.
Lyra's investigation of contemporary connections had revealed that many of the institutions and corporations that had participated in Operation Mindbridge continued to maintain influential positions within modern medical research, pharmaceutical development, and government policy through personnel who had been directly involved in illegal activities or institutional leadership that had inherited responsibility for ongoing concealment and protection of historical crimes while maintaining institutional authority and commercial success. The contemporary institutional connections had included identification of current executives and research directors at major pharmaceutical companies whose career advancement had been based on knowledge and expertise derived from Operation Mindbridge participation, creating ongoing institutional liability and professional compromise that required continued concealment and protection to prevent exposure of historical crimes and ongoing institutional complicity in systematic human rights violations. Additionally, the contemporary analysis had revealed that current government officials and agency administrators included personnel whose career development had been influenced by Operation Mindbridge activities or institutional protection, creating ongoing governmental complicity and administrative pressure to maintain concealment and prevent accountability for historical crimes that would expose current leadership to legal liability and professional consequences. The modern institutional protection had been maintained through systematic coordination among government agencies, pharmaceutical corporations, and academic institutions whose ongoing collaboration in medical research and policy development had required continued suppression of historical evidence and prevention of accountability proceedings that would expose institutional participation in systematic human rights violations and criminal activities that continued to influence contemporary operations and institutional authority. Cassandra's recognition that their discovery represented evidence that could expose ongoing institutional conspiracy and contemporary criminal complicity had created immediate security concerns and personal safety risks that exceeded anything their family's financial crisis had prepared them to understand or manage when their accidental property acquisition had transformed them from desperate homeowners into potential witnesses whose knowledge could threaten institutional legitimacy and personal safety through exposure of crimes that modern power structures had been systematically designed to conceal and protect. The documentation had proven that institutional protection and cover-up activities had included systematic elimination of witnesses and research personnel who had attempted to expose illegal activities or withdraw from program participation, with detailed records of murders, disappearances, and systematic intimidation that had been utilized to maintain operational security while preventing exposure of activities that would have triggered federal investigation and international accountability proceedings. The witness elimination activities had been coordinated through federal intelligence agencies and institutional security organizations that had utilized professional assassination capabilities and systematic intimidation to eliminate threats to operational security while maintaining plausible denial and prevention of investigation that would have exposed systematic murder and criminal conspiracy that characterized institutional protection of Operation Mindbridge and related human experimentation programs. Lyra's analysis of witness elimination documentation had revealed that families and associates of research personnel who had attempted to expose illegal activities had been systematically targeted through coordinated harassment, economic pressure, and physical threats that had been designed to prevent testimony and evidence disclosure while maintaining institutional protection through systematic intimidation and criminal conspiracy that exceeded normal security measures and legal protection activities. The systematic nature of witness elimination and institutional protection had demonstrated that contemporary institutions whose legitimacy depended on concealing Operation Mindbridge activities possessed resources and capabilities for elimination or neutralization that exceeded typical criminal organization capabilities through coordination with federal agencies and institutional authorities whose protection required ongoing concealment and prevention of accountability through any means necessary, including systematic murder and criminal conspiracy. But Cassandra's military background and biomedical research experience had taught her that institutional transparency and public exposure often provided better protection than secrecy and institutional cooperation when evidence of systematic criminal activity could benefit society while protecting families through visibility and public awareness that made covert elimination difficult for institutions whose authority depended on maintaining public legitimacy and democratic appearances that could be compromised through exposure of crimes that modern power structures had been systematically designed to conceal and protect.
The initial contact with investigative journalists had been coordinated through secure communication methods and verification procedures that had enabled authentication of documentary evidence while maintaining operational security and family protection through professional journalism standards and legal protections that characterized legitimate news investigation and public interest reporting that served democratic accountability and institutional transparency objectives. The journalistic investigation had been conducted by teams of experienced investigative reporters from major news organizations, including The Washington Post, The New York Times, and The Guardian, whose professional expertise and institutional resources had enabled comprehensive verification of documentary evidence while providing legal protection and security measures that exceeded anything individual families could achieve through normal legal representation and governmental assistance. The news organizations had coordinated with federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI's Civil Rights Division and the Department of Justice's Human Rights and Special Prosecutions Section, to ensure appropriate legal authority and investigative coordination while maintaining journalistic independence and public accountability that served both law enforcement objectives and democratic transparency requirements that characterized legitimate investigation of government crimes and institutional accountability. The federal investigation had been launched within days of initial journalistic contact, encompassing comprehensive forensic analysis of Operation Mindbridge documentation, authentication of research records and experimental evidence, and coordinated investigation of contemporary institutional connections that indicated ongoing criminal conspiracy and cover-up activities that required immediate law enforcement intervention and legal proceedings to prevent continued criminal activity and institutional protection of historical crimes. The FBI investigation had included establishment of federal witness protection services for Cassandra and Lyra that had provided immediate security measures and legal representation while enabling their continued cooperation with federal authorities, whose investigation required comprehensive documentation and testimony that would support criminal prosecution and civil rights litigation against institutions and individuals whose participation in systematic human rights violations had continued to influence contemporary operations and institutional authority. The federal witness protection had also included immediate financial assistance and housing security that had resolved their family's economic crisis while enabling Cassandra to pursue advocacy work and historical documentation that honored their accidental discovery and contributed to justice proceedings that served both individual victims and broader public interest in institutional accountability and democratic transparency that prevented ongoing criminal activity and governmental abuse. The Department of Justice proceedings had resulted in comprehensive legal action, including criminal prosecution of surviving research personnel and institutional administrators whose participation in Operation Mindbridge activities could be proven through documentary evidence, civil rights litigation against institutions whose ongoing operations had been influenced by illegal activities, and restitution proceedings that provided provided financial settlements for thousands of identified victims and their families, while establishing victim compensation funds and ongoing medical assistance programs that addressed health consequences and psychological trauma that had resulted from systematic abuse and illegal experimentation, creating comprehensive support systems and accountability mechanisms that served both individual justice and broader social healing. The international accountability proceedings had been coordinated through United Nations human rights mechanisms and international criminal justice institutions that had investigated Operation Mindbridge as systematic crimes against humanity and government-sponsored torture that violated international law and human rights standards, establishing legal precedents and accountability mechanisms that prevented similar activities while providing international recognition and support for victims and their families. The international investigation had also resulted in comprehensive reform of medical research ethics and government oversight mechanisms that had been implemented throughout participating countries to prevent institutional participation in human experimentation and ensure ongoing accountability and transparency that protected individual rights while enabling legitimate scientific investigation and medical research that served public health objectives without compromising ethical standards and human rights protections.
Today, Cassandra works as a federal witness advocate and human rights researcher, while Lyra continues developing her analytical and investigative skills through specialized educational programs and mentorship opportunities that honor their contribution to historical justice and institutional accountability. Their bus depot has been preserved as a historical site and research center that documents government crimes and institutional abuse while providing educational resources and victim services that serve ongoing justice and healing processes. The Operation Mindbridge revelations have triggered comprehensive reform of medical research oversight, pharmaceutical industry regulation, and government accountability mechanisms that have prevented ongoing criminal activity while establishing institutional transparency and democratic oversight that protect individual rights and serve public interest in legitimate scientific investigation and governmental operations that respect human dignity and constitutional protections, rather than institutional protection and criminal immunity that had characterized previous approaches to government oversight and accountability. The comprehensive exposure of Operation Mindbridge and institutional conspiracy has demonstrated that individual courage and systematic investigation can overcome institutional power and governmental secrecy when evidence of criminal activity serves broader public interest and democratic accountability, providing hope and practical examples for ongoing efforts to ensure governmental transparency and institutional integrity that protect individual rights while serving legitimate public safety and national security objectives through constitutional processes and democratic oversight rather than systematic abuse and criminal conspiracy. What do you think about this incredible discovery and the courage it took to expose these crimes? Have you ever had to choose between personal safety and doing what's right? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of ordinary people who change the world by standing up for justice.